You're listening to the Full Court Press with your host, Drew Duncan. Don't you dare touch that dial. Hello, everybody. I am Drew Duncan, host of the Full Court Press. Don't forget, you can always find me on social media. That is at Drew Duncan 83. Additionally, you could find the Full Court Press on social media as well and all of our subsidiaries. And that is the Full Court Press Football, the Full Court Press Basketball, and the Full Court Press MMA. We got a lot to discuss today. I want to piggyback on something that I sort of began to talk about yesterday on the program, and that is simply whether or not we're going to see too much football. And as I made mention of, when I first learned about the AAF, it was actually years ago. We're talking 5-6 years ago. I'll never forget seeing it pop up. And then there was this website and we went to it and it was, this whole coming soon thing. And I thought, okay, this could be great. And one of the things that I questioned is sustainability. Well, while I was anticipating this, last year, Vince McMahon decided to, whether or not he was planning this ahead or whatever the case is, if you saw the 30 for 30 on ESPN about the XFL and what happened to it, at the end of it, Vince McMahon discussed whether or not the possibility of having another league could happen and maybe redoing it again. And, we'll kind of see what happens. Then all of a sudden an announcement gets made that the XFL is going to happen. And I mean, it absolutely exploded and everybody was excited. And of course it's Vince McMahon. And so everybody goes, oh, they're starstruck by it. They're wowed. And of course, everybody's got an opinion. The XFL failed for a reason. The USFL failed for X amount of reasons. Nobody can compete with the NFL, and Vince McMahon has always been very competitive. And I think he was willing to make a move on the NFL. Well, then seemingly to a good majority of people out of nowhere, the AAF pops up. And when that AAF pops up, there's really no background to it. There's no history to it. And for the most part, it just sort of happened, right? It happened. One day, all of a sudden, there's a game of football on. And then there's highlights on social media. Everybody becomes enamored. And I knew that I was excited for the potential of year-round football because of the AAF and because of the XFL. And I thought we could potentially see year-round football, right? Maybe like the AAF ends in April-ish. Here comes the XFL. They start in April, end around June. See where it takes us. And then I find out that the XFL is going to be happening right around the same time next year. And of course, they made this huge announcement with Bob Stoops, and, that caused a lot of people to go into a frenzy over that. But now we have sort of this, at least first weekend success with the AAF, previous to what most of us at some point saw with the XFL. And that was all of these viewers, huge buildup, and then this massive letdown. And then, of course, there were just other things that played into it. What should have been their premier game didn't end up even being shown because of, technical difficulties, et cetera, et cetera. And then there was, of course, all the things happened that were, they tried to incorporate some of their WWE style into things. And, as I've alluded to before, people want to feel something authentic. That's why they love MMA. That's why they do gravitate towards college football than in the NFL, because to a good majority of people, it still feels authentic, even with all this terrible officiating. There are people out there that are wise enough, I think, to go, you know what, it's just bad officiating, and there's really nothing that any of us can do about it. Regardless, the point that I'm making is if you want something that feels real, you watch the AAF, for the most part, it feels real. It feels like football. Will it feel like that with the XFL? And I think one of the things that we need to calm down on is it's only a first weekend in the AAF. And there was really only one close game to watch, really, right? You had, 38-22, one of the scores. I think another one was 40-8. Another one of the scores was 26-0, if I remember correctly. So while there are people that are somewhat enamored by this, I think a lot of what's going on right now is the desperation for football. Again, quick hit on the things that I didn't like about the AAF. Did not like the idea that they built it as a pro league, but then when you got to the game itself, the good majority of the conversation, even from one of the co-founders, was this is a developmental league. You're a pro football player. You're labeled as such. You're paid as one. It's how it should be. This is not amateurism. One of the other things I didn't like, no kickoff. For me, it's not about player safety. It's about the ability to get back into a football game. You're down by a couple of scores. The kickoff can really turn that around. You can put your offense in good field position, potentially get a touchdown, get you back in the game, maybe a kick return for a touchdown, etc. One of the other things that I didn't like was the availability. Where do I find a game of football at? Supposedly it's on Bleacher Report Live, other various avenues of social media, which of course you're going to have to pay for. And then it's on CBS Sports Network. And as I recall, it is one select game a week. So even if I have CBS Sports Network, I'm only going to have the ability to watch one of your games. And so the league has to hope that it's a very good game to keep people enticed, as opposed to just the highlights that are shown over the weekend. Things that I did like about the AAF. Length of game, phenomenal. Over in a couple of hours instead of the 3.5 hour drab that we often get with the NFL and even college football for that matter. One of the things that I loved was the being there inside track when you're hearing the replay official and getting into that's just phenomenal. It's an inside track. You feel like you're there. And we're getting more education on what they're looking for. I think it's phenomenal. One of the other things that I absolutely loved was the different camera angles, hearing the play calling on the field. I thought that was an interesting aspect. So there was some really good intrigue there, but it is only one weekend. What I'm pointing to is sustainability, as I mentioned earlier. It's very difficult to sustain at anything. When you look down a list of journalists that maybe you like, entertainers that you love, whether it's music, movies, whatever the case is, stand-up comedy, television shows. I mean, people sometimes come and they go, sometimes they go, then they come back, or they're gone again, or we hardly ever hear from them, or it's just this flash in the pan thing. I mean, how many TV shows don't last past a pilot? NASCAR, and this is the danger that I'm getting into, with the XFL and the AAF running side by side, it is going to be very difficult, I think, on ticket holders and attendance. One of the factors that played into the AAF not having a long football game was the simple fact that their commercials were either shown side by side, which they've done with the NFL, but just not a whole lot, obviously. And they've even done it in NASCAR as well. But then, of course, probably a lack of sponsorship. I mean, obviously, there's some big money involved. Ebersol and Pullian and all those, or Pullian and all those guys. I mean, they're coming together. There's a lot of NFL minds. Daryl the Moose Johnston. I mean, there's a lot of money being circulated around. Troy Polamalu, if I remember correctly, invested as well. Notable NFL coaches. I mean, at some point, you got to make sure that you're able to pay people. I mean, that's one of the things that happened with the USFL. I mean, they were incapable of running it because there was not enough big money backing it. It's a simple fact of things. And so what I wonder to myself is there going to be too much football running simultaneously? You know, the AFL and NFL merged for 1,000,001 different reasons, but I'm going to tell you what ultimately drives any boat afloat. And I think we all know the answer to this question, and it's money. If it don't make dollars, it don't make sense. Isn't that the old adage? One of the things that I honestly foresee happening for this to work out, for us to be able to have football after the NFL season is over and carry us for a few more months into late April, I think that we're going to have to see some sort of merger between the XFL and the AAF. We don't know what kind of product we're going to get with the XFL. And we still don't even really know what product we're getting with the American Football Alliance, or the Alliance of American Football, pardon me. We still don't really know what we're getting, right? On the surface, initially, for the most part, it looks good. I would say I'm 75% for it and 25% against it. And I think that what we need to look at is whether or not they can individually keep themselves afloat, because I don't think so. I think at some point, 2 or 3 years down the road, what we're going to see is, because I love competition. Do not get me wrong. I absolutely think it's good for everybody to compete. I mean, obviously, that's why I watch football, is because I love competition. That's why I watch any sport, MMA, basketball, football, whatever the case is. But the point that I'm making is I think that we can see where there's maybe too much going on simultaneously. The college level and the NFL level, we've all known for years, are just two completely different entities. Yeah, it's football, but it's football on two completely different playing fields, two completely different levels. Sure, there's a lot of similarities to it, but we have an understanding of college football is college football and pro football is pro football. And if we're going to have 3 different pro football leagues and 2 of them going on at the same time, well, then legitimately, how can either one of those even begin to think about staying afloat when they're going on side by side? So either one is going to produce a phenomenal product and the other will not, and it's just going to go away, because after all, Vince McMahon has said repeatedly that he is going to, quote, reimagine the game of football, or we will see 2 really phenomenal products and the competition level could be great. I mean, I'm not saying that it will happen, that, this could all, explode for the worse. There's the slight potential that, both of these products end up being phenomenal and we're able to continue watching 2 great products simultaneously. But I just don't know how many ticket holders you can have. Again, I think the best thing that I can think of is NASCAR. 16 races a year, if I remember correctly, up to 40 races a year. And their ratings have struggled as a result. Their attendance has struggled as a result. They've tried so many different things with their playoff that they did and all that kind of, I don't know how long it can sustain. We may end up with 2 products that are just not good enough, and then that's it. Then there's no football after the NFL. I mean, those are really boils down to it. To me, those are the only options. Either they're both not good enough and it all falls apart. They're both really good. And ticket sales somehow are able to stay afloat and they're able to get sponsorship and we have a lot of competition and it becomes kind of the WCW, WWE Monday Night Wars thing again of which game are you going to watch, right? Or it gets to a point where maybe one is kind of carrying the other a little bit. One's doing good, just not good enough. And they have to merger. And for me, that's the more viable thing or the more viable option that I think we're going to end up seeing. And that is the AAF and the XFL creating a merger probably 2 or 3 years down the road and basically create another NFL is really what it would be. I don't know what you would call it. But, they would definitely have to be able to come to terms because obviously the AAF has had a completely different standpoint than what Vince McMahon has thrown out there with the XFL. And that would be the most difficult part of creating that merger. Vince McMahon's going to have his way of doing things. The other guys are going to have their way of doing things, Napoleon, and what the idea behind each league is supposed to be. I think Vince McMahon wants to be revered as being competitive with the NFL, whereas the American Alliance of, the Alliance of American Football, man, they got to do something with that name, wants to be revered more as an up-and-comer league. Hey, we're training guys for the NFL. This is a developmental league. This is what this is, whereas Vince McMahon doesn't see it that way. So regardless of that, I think that those are some of my concerns. We'll see what happens. Obviously, in the weeks to come and in the years to come, things will continue to develop. In the meantime, I am Drew Duncan, host of the Full Court Press. You can find me on social media at DrewDuncan83 across the board on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And additionally, you can find the Full Court Press in all of our subsidiaries. Full Court Press, football, basketball, and MMA on social media as well. And as always, don't you dare touch that dial.